My name is Jan Wilczek from WolfSound.com. Welcome to WolfTalk, a podcast about audio programming. In this podcast, you will learn how to build your career in programming or research related to audio, meet programmers and researchers from all around the world, and learn about the intricacies of sound. Hi everyone, welcome to the 28th episode of the WolfTalk podcast. Today, as usual, I have a very special guest for you, namely Ilias Bergstrom. He's a senior C++ software engineer and a software architect. In the audio community, he's most well known for his work at Elk Audio, where he worked on their Elk Audio OS, Elk Live software for live music jamming over the internet, and their digital audio workstation called Sushi. He's also known for his talks on digital audio workstation architecture. Finally, he's the author of software called 2, which he describes as media control workstation. In the interview, we discuss his career, which includes an interesting mix of academia and industry, how to work with software architecture, and how to learn C++ and software design. If you're into software engineering books, you simply cannot miss our discussion of Ilias' top books in this area. As usual, all places, people, references, and the books, of course, mentioned in this podcast episode can be found in the episode notes at dwolfsound.com/talk028. Once again, it's dwolfsound.com/talk028. If you want to help the podcast because you enjoyed so much, please subscribe to the WolfSound YouTube channel and give a thumbs up to this video. Also, consider leaving up to a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Finally, please suggest in the comments on the YouTube video or on the blog who should be the next guest. And now, Ilias Bergstrom. Hi, Ilias. Thanks for agreeing on this interview. Could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, Jan. Thank you very much for the invite. I'm Ilias Bergstrom. I'm a software engineer and researcher with a big love for audio software. And I also have some love left for software for all kinds of live performance that can be used together with music. For example, live graphics, control, lighting, the stuff that you also see on stage besides the band and the instruments.
Okay, and I'm sure we'll delve into the details of it in this podcast episode. So tell me, how did your interest in music start? So were you playing a musical instrument?
Yeah, both my parents have always listened to music, and I think they have very different and both very eclectic tastes. So I grew up with listening to Laurie Anderson at age 4, that sort of thing. That was definitely a good upbringing, and I took after them. And I've always loved listening to music. I've started playing synthesizers and drums as a teenager, and I haven't stopped, basically.
Nice. And I know that you studied, computer science as your bachelor's, but I'm curious, did you already think about doing something musical in your professional career back then?
I'd say so. I studied computer science because I loved media creation software. I started learning 3D animation software as a teenager. I was one of the few 15-year-olds with Windows NT on their computer that you couldn't play games on, but you could run Softimage 3D and Maya on, and that's what I was doing. And I was mostly interested in graphics, more kind of also real-time abstract graphics, aesthetics, demo scene, if you know what that is. So, of course you do. That's how it started. That's how I knew I had to get into this.
Okay, nice. And were you able to do something similar during your studies, or was it really focused on other things? Because I know that computer science programs are quite, general.
I did computer graphics courses, both in my undergrad and master's, yes. And actually, funny you should say, in the evenings during my undergrads, I also took university courses in audio engineering, yes. So, for fun, I have a few extra credits. I don't know, I did another 6 months of uni in parallel, sort of, on audio engineering. So, yeah, definitely relevant.
Okay, nice. And which university was it?
At the time, it was called Växjö University in Sweden. Now it's called Linnaeus University.
Okay, thanks. So then after this bachelor's course, you wanted to do masters, but I saw that you chose a different university for this purpose. I'm curious, like, what guided your direction there?
I knew that University College London had a very good computer graphics program, and the culture I love the most probably is from the UK, or through the UK, if you know what I mean, in terms of music, art.
Mm-hmm.
And I took my chances and applied, aiming quite high. I guess UCL is meant to be a good uni, and I got accepted, so that was good fun. I did manage to pass. And being Swedish, I could borrow the money to study from the government, so I could afford it. A master's in London isn't something that anybody in the world can afford, but Swedes are lucky that way, that you can just borrow the money.
Okay, so yeah, that's really, really fortunate. And it's interesting that they allow you to borrow money, to study abroad.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And very good interest. I'm still paying it off, still good interest.
Yeah, I understand. And how was the course? Do you still remember how was it?
It was quite cutthroat, actually. It was it was also early 2000s. So the professor first day was like in a Hollywood movie. It's like 3 out of 4 will drop out in the first semester, that sort of thing. And he wasn't wrong, but dog eat dog. Not something that would fly today, but that was then.
Okay, cool. And did you do anything related to music? Because I imagine you did a lot related to computer graphics.
It was a lot of computer graphics, real-time graphics, OpenGL, a lot of computer vision, which is DSP in 2 dimensions. So I did DSP there. It's the same math, just 2-dimensional in many ways. And and for my thesis project, I also did a kind of real-time visual music instrument. So you could control graphics synthesizers with MIDI.
Okay, so this was already the origin of your idea that you developed later, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. We'll get to this.
Absolutely.
Before recording the interview, we talked a bit, and I was surprised to learn that Ilias has studied DSP in the context of graphics, and as an audio developer, he does not specialize in DSP. If you don't know what DSP is, let me quickly explain. It's the backbone of any audio processing software. It's the theory behind the code. The code just implements DSP models. If you know programming but don't know DSP, it'll be hard for you to create any kind of audio effect. Fortunately, for Ilias and everyone interested, there's now an easy way to get up to speed with audio DSP, even if you don't have university background in mathematics, software, or engineering. My DSP Pro online course. It teaches you all you need to know about audio DSP, from the basics up to advanced topics. For the most demanding clients, there's an opportunity to get mentored one-on-one sessions to help speed up the progress. If you'd like to check out the course, simply go to wolfsoundacademy.com/DSP-Pro. Once again, it's wolfsoundacademy.com/DSP-Pro. So after your master's, you got the position of a software engineer at a company that's called Computer Control Systems. So can you share, how this position came to be and what were your duties there?
Yeah, it was a very interesting first job. I mean, it was an interesting project I worked on as well. It's a structural engineering company. They do software for CAD and structural engineering. Let's put it that way. And after trying me out for the first 3 months, probably quite unusually for a junior developer, they just gave me a large greenfield project that took 2.5 years to finish because it was huge, not because I was slow. Very early on, it was a CAD software and static analysis application for mixed and concrete construction and steel, which is like buildings and bridges. And it was written from zero, except for the physics simulation engine, which was in-house. I didn't write that. And even more unusually, I was given the task to architect, design, implement the whole thing myself. And this could have gone horribly wrong, but it was a great trial by fire. And I really liked the work. I'd say my guide throughout the design was the Gang of Four design patterns book that I had very recently read just between my studies and starting to work at SCISS. So that was a godsend. If I hadn't read that book, maybe I wouldn't have been here now. I don't know.
Okay, nice. And how were you able, because as I understand, the project was done in C# and C++. So how were you able, were you already so fluent in these technologies at that time? Or did you need to make a lot of learning?
I had to learn C#. I didn't really know it. I had worked in C++ before. But if you know Java, which, at that time is what universities taught for object-oriented engineering, and if you know a bit of C++, C# is easy. It's just, same, but different. And it was funny when you asked me, how did you get to be a lead developer for your first job? I'm like, I never thought of it that way. I wasn't lead developer. It said just software engineer, junior on my contract, but they tricked me. But yeah, now that you say so, I guess that's what I was doing.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think it's an amazing opportunity because it's something that you would be expected to do in your free time, kind of, right? Like you're a junior and where you can work on a larger project as an architect, in your free time, on your personal project. Well, here you didn't have to do this, because you were given this opportunity. So I think it's very, very valuable.
Yeah. No, this could only have happened in the early 2000s, I think, because most of the other developers didn't have a computer science background. They came from maths and physics. So, I couldn't ever do the maths they did. But they didn't know the computer science that I had very freshly learned at uni. So, I could do the kind of design and thing that you do as a computer scientist, which isn't just programming, starting with line 1 down to line 100,000, you're done. Also structuring that, which is maybe not something someone with a math background will do intuitively.
Yeah.
I suppose that was why. But yeah, that wouldn't happen today. This was almost 25 years ago.
And last question on this project. Did you use any framework for the graphical user interface?
It's funny you should say so. I actually made one. I realized that they had more projects like it in the pipeline. So kind of a quarter through the work, I was like, shouldn't what I'm doing be a framework that you can reuse in the other 3 programs? And they agreed, and that's what I did. Also for the core engine and stuff, not just the GUI.
Okay, cool. So then in 2027, you decided to go back to academia for a PhD program, again at University College London. So
2007, I guess, but yeah, 2027 is in the future.
Okay, sorry, what did I say?
2027, that's fine.
Oh, sorry. I meant 2007, of course.
Yeah.
Sorry. So my question is, why did you want to do a PhD there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I carried on in my free time to play a lot of music, and I was kind of writing code on my thesis project, which was too much fun to leave alone. And I figured, how do you get to do a really fun project for more than 3 years PhD? And so I figured, okay, what's the best place to do it at? I found Professor Alan Blackwell at Cambridge. I'm like, yeah, I'll do a PhD with him at Cambridge. Aim high. And he liked my project, and we developed the project idea back and forth. And he's like, yeah, I'll supervise you if you apply for funding. I didn't get the funding, but we stayed in touch. We even wrote a paper later together, not having any formal connection. And the project that I developed with his help, I shopped around and I got a connection to do the same project as a PhD at UCL.
Okay, and can you maybe expand what was your PhD exactly about?
Oh, absolutely. It's the sort of the tools and practices for performing music and graphics live the same way that you use your body to perform just music live, using instruments as the extension of the bodies of the musicians on stage. So sort of like, how do you play graphics with instruments live, remapping sort of the embodied knowledge that you have of your instruments to not only music, but audiovisual music, that sort of thing. And yeah, I wrote the software for it, did a lot of iterations, did a couple of live performances in collaboration with bands. That was the idea.
Okay, nice. So would you say it's more applied than scientific, or there was a lot of science behind it involved?
There was a lot of science, if by science you do not necessarily refer to as, I guess, the hard sciences. So definitely not physics.
No, but I mean, any kind of science also, like, psychology, I don't know,
absolutely.
like, questionnaire based and so on.
My supervisor, yeah, I mean, I was assuming no prior knowledge, but you have it. My supervisor for the PhD was a neuroscientist, Bolotto. He was very interested on the neuroscientific side of remapping the embodied knowledge, which I had never thought of, but that was interesting. And interaction design, human-computer interaction, it used to be called, is the field that I guess I contributed most of the knowledge to. That's where many of the papers are.
Okay.
Of course, I wrote a lot of code, but I didn't publish in computer science journals, not in that sense.
Okay, I understand. And in terms of learnings, can you specify what were the biggest, takeaways that you took with you for your professional career later on from the PhD?
That's an excellent question, because I guess there's a lot of sort of preconceptions around that, but it's not always stated very clearly. What does a PhD give you? I like your question. So I guess during a bachelor's and master's, besides the actual curriculum, you learn to manage your time, you learn to complete projects, to work independently, and of course you learn to learn. So in a PhD, you also learn to look for knowledge and, most importantly, to produce knowledge. So not just learn what you're given. And there's definitely many transferable skills from a PhD and also the postdocs to working in also our industry. Research was today, and it is also, it was then, is also today a very sort of demanding, fast-paced, competitive environment. You've probably come across the term publish or perish. It's very telling. And during a PhD, you learn to take a vague R&D project from initial idea to completion, which in that case is the acceptance of a published research paper that you have to write with very tight constraints in terms of time and budget, which is very transferable as a skill, I'd say. And also you learn to communicate effectively. You present at conferences, you write papers, and not the least, you learn to teach, which is very useful when mentoring colleagues, junior colleagues in any industry.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And like, to me personally, your point on, learning to learn is especially dear, because it's amazing if you think about it that we have so many students that go, into university, like even ground school, right? But let's say university, and no one ever teaches them how to approach learning, right? Which is the core activity that they do there. So if someone's clever, then they start on their own learning how to learn, but it's not a given, right? So I really like your point there.
And that's many software engineers ask me, or people that want to go into engineering, shouldn't I just learn it alone? It's just programming. But I'm like, no, university teaches you many more things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, on your point, besides just the actual book.
Yeah, exactly.
Or books.
Exactly. Yeah. So after your PhD, you kind of continued with academia, and you became a postdoctoral researcher at Event Lab in Barcelona. Is it correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you share how it came to be, and what was this position about, if there was a main theme?
Yeah. So think back in 2010, when the Oculus Rift didn't exist and virtual reality was science fiction. And Mel Slater is one of the founding fathers of modern virtual reality research, and he had this virtual reality research lab in Barcelona. This was, as I said, long before any of the commercial VR that we see today. So the setup there was 3 setups. It was a cave, which is a box with projectors outside. The whole thing cost €1 million. And then we had 2 head-mounted display setups, which cost like $300K, $500,000 each, just to get what is similar to the experience that you get today with the most expensive Meta headset for, a couple of €100, maybe 1,000. Back in the day, you need 300 times that. And we used those tools to do neuroscience and psychology experiments. Mm-hmm. Obviously, my interest was also the full body motion capture, real-time interaction, audio, 3D audio, graphics. And the knowledge production we did was, besides the technology itself, on neuroscience and psychology experiments. We used this technology as a tool to answer questions really about humans that you can't really ask if you don't use VR. That was the concept. So, manipulating the reality you perceive while you are in it and interact with it. Super interesting. Much of the work I did there was related to audio and even musicianship.
Okay. I wanted to ask, because I'm not sure if this paper was in this period or in the next one, but there was a paper about the relation of VR presence and stress.
Yeah.
So I'm just a quick question: can you really alleviate stress in a VR experience?
Yes, there was a paper about that. That was probably one of the few I did that were not related to audio. But we found that if you are in a physically stressful position, but you perceive in VR that your body is in a different position than the actual physical one, your electrophysiological stress responses are showing that you are less stressed than under the condition where you perceive the actual position of your body, or a more stressful one where it's even worse. This might be the study I did that was the most morally questionable, because it was funded by the aviation industry. You can see where this is going. They just pack you in like chicken on the plane and put a VR headset on you. I guess that was the idea. I haven't seen that happening yet. I hope it doesn't. But it would work if they did.
Yeah, but it sounds super useful. Like if someone is scared of flying, I mean, why wouldn't like to alleviate? Why wouldn't they like to alleviate this by, a VR headset?
Yeah, look at the bright side of things. You're right.
Okay, so after 4 years there, you switched to the KTH University in Sweden. So again, why this change, and what were your duties there?
It was a very interesting position. And it's the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. And what I did work on was concentrate a lot more on media technology and interaction design, again, as fields, actually contribute knowledge to interaction design, which is something that I started on during my PhD. I'm not going to go into the details, but it was, again, real-time multisensory technology. I also wrote a paper that I think is quite relevant for this audience, with Alan Blackwell, the practices of programming. How do you go about writing code under different conditions? It's like, are you sketching? Is this going to be production code? Are you actually making a piece of art? Or are you saving lives? Are you building a bridge? You have to have different approaches depending on what the purpose is and what time of the development is. And that's what the paper is about.
Yeah, so I haven't managed to read the paper before our interview, but I've already downloaded it and I have it here, so I'll definitely check it out afterward, and we'll link to it in the episode notes, of course.
Yeah.
So you were, previously you were working with audio in VR from more like a psychological perspective here at KTH. Then you were back to kind of how you can express how can you change your gestures into music? Is that correct?
Among other things, yes. It was it was multisensory projects, yeah. And I'm not even going to try to go into the details for lack of time.
Okay, sure. So during your academia time, you also conducted teaching. So can you briefly share what did you teach?
Oh yeah. So the theoretic side of media technology and methods for it. I managed a course on media production, a master's course with a lot of guest teachers and stuff. I taught a course on creative coding, programming as design practice. I taught a lot on interaction design / human-computer interaction. And I also taught on philosophy of science, actually, in the media production master's course that they had at the time, because that's something that I just, had read up on, and they asked for volunteers, and I liked the topic.
Okay, nice. And can you briefly elaborate, because you touched on this in this paper and in your teaching also, what you exactly mean under creative coding?
I think it's very relevant for this audience, actually. It means using code as a creative material. So obviously, you don't really do creative coding when you sort of design the architecture of a DAW. Then it's hardcore engineering a lot more. But just as when you paint, you use paint. When you code, you can still make images with that. So your material for art is code. You can paint with code, and a lot of people do it. So think of when you write audio DSP code, a lot of it is actually, to some extent, creative coding. It's a creative output. You are, in a sense, an artist when you tweak an algorithm, and based on your ears and your own aesthetic preferences, and not just the technical specification, you make decisions about how it should sound. That is, in a way, creative coding. When you're prototyping a synth in Max MSP, that is creative coding.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I really agree, because sometimes it's hard to even quantify, what makes a good sounding plugin, for example, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure you should even try. If people like it, it's a good sounding plugin.
So is this practice still, an interest of yours? Like, do you still do from time to time kind of creative coding pursuits?
No, I don't. Not really. I have too many other things going on.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay. So in 2017, you went back to the industry to work at SCISS. I don't know if I pronounced this right. SCISS.
Yes, SCISS.
And so why did you want to leave academia?
It was for many reasons. In part because I wanted to spend more time actually writing software and making tools, while academia is a context where this isn't really encouraged too strongly. I mean, you can definitely do that, but what really counts is the papers you've written. And if you can write papers without having written any software, that's even better for your career. And actually, a colleague had the genius idea of finding really interesting non-academic software and writing about it and saving a lot of time that way. Just a hack. And also I had become a father, which meant I couldn't really move to a new country as easily, which is the norm in academia if you want to find a position relevant to your research direction.
Okay, I understand. So what were your duties there at SCISS?
They had one massive product, the Uniview planetarium application. I said they had because that whole product is now sold to JUCE, which is a company that made the first planetariums, and they needed the planetarium software, so they just decided to buy SCISS. And this was before COVID, so they offered the developers to move to Germany, and those that didn't, including myself, found new jobs. But yeah, before that, my duties were very varied. I worked across the code base on the control and the UI side, on the audio engine side, on the graphics. I did work on the automatic calibration of the several projectors that make up the planetarium image. You put a DSLR in the middle, and then there's libraries that do the heavy lifting in terms of computer vision to kind of make all the images blend together. That's something I worked on there. And I also made a cool feature for planetariums, which is the adaptive soundtrack, so that, you have music that interactively adapts to a live astronomy presentation to kind of follow the narrative, depending on what's going on. And also documented the huge code bases architecture for JUCE to use, because there wasn't really much documentation before. That was a very interesting project. And that's about it.
Can I ask on this soundtrack feature? So which approach, because I'm not even sure, like, what, I guess this wasn't generating music, right? In a sense, but it was more of like steering the music. So can you elaborate, like, what was the feature exactly about, and how did you approach this from the, algorithmic perspective?
I chose a commercial audio engine there. It made a lot of sense to use Fmod and integrate it inside. And I also curated basically sound packs, sets of music, which was either very simple ambient music that I made myself or much more usefully Creative Commons free to use ambient music that was up for grabs, and really good music actually. And then there was the creative work of deciding for what kind of events and actions in the planetarium show would you use what kind of music. And I created a number of such packs that people could choose to use. So if you're flying fast in space, you want something else. And if you're looking at a dead planet and something else, and if you're looking at a bright planet or a, Earth, living planet, etc., that sort of thing.
Okay, so this was very creative indeed, because
it was,
you had to compose music, but also kind of curate music. I like, it seems there was a little bit of sound design involved as well.
Not so much. I didn't do much composition, really trivial, basic ambient stuff. I didn't spend much time making music at work. Not at all.
Okay.
The curated music selection, which was a much better resource.
Okay. So then finally in 2021, you joined Elk Audio. And I think from your work there, you're, the most known to the audio community in general. So can you share what were your duties there? I kind of feel like I almost have to challenge you on that one, because I worked with such amazing people there, like Gustav Andersson and Stefano Zambon, who I've learned so much from. And I would definitely not be the developer I am if I didn't work with them. I mean, I could go on. I worked with Ruben Svensson, etc., who is still an audio dev. But yeah, thank you for the compliment. When I started working there, I was one of 2 principal developers on the digital audio workstation that we have embedded in the Elk Audio S, which is Sushi, which Gustav has talked a lot more about. He and Stefano really made it. I joined like 2 years later, and it was pretty much ready then. My first task on it was adding LV2 plugin hosting support, which gave access to many, many more plugins that were available open source. That was a motivation to a great extent. And then I adapted Sushi's architecture a lot to make it embeddable in host applications and plugins so that it doesn't just run sort of standalone, but it can actually be part of other applications as well. And then I took part in the normal development cycle of Sushi. So bug fixes and feature additions across the code base. Too many to mention, obviously, across the years, but that sort of work. I managed Elk's research collaboration with the Royal College of Music as well in the Elk Live project. And Gustav mentioned the Elk Live project I heard in the episodes. I'm not going to go too much into details. It was the thing that we made so that people can play music together over the internet with very low latency. And for that, I worked for the last 3 years, not exclusively on that, but also on that. I was lead developer on mainly 3 projects, which was the Elk Live plugins, so that you can embed essentially Sushi inside of a DAW through a JUCE plugin, the desktop C++ component for the post R&D stage, the R&D bit I remember Ruben Svensson did, and also a yet to be announced C++ networked audio project that was quite big. Mm-hmm. Nice. So there you really touch on a lot of different areas. Let's pause here for a moment. In the answer to the last question, Ilias mentioned the JUCE C++ framework. What is JUCE? It is an open source, cross-platform C++ application development framework that makes it easy to create audio software as well as audio plugins and plugin hosts. You can write code once and build VST, AU, AUV3, AAX, and LV2 plugins on Windows, macOS, iOS, Android, and Linux, as well as embedded platforms. I've been successful using JUCE since 2018, both in my private and professional projects, so I'm delighted that they're sponsoring the podcast. I especially like how JUCE makes it easy for beginners to jump right into creating audio plugins and applications without worrying about C++ quirks. JUCE is used by the majority of the world's most important audio companies, but it is free for personal use and there is affordable pricing available for companies just starting out. Apart from the framework itself, JUCE has an amazing community of users gathered in the JUCE forum, which is a great resource to learn audio programming on its own. Most recently, the JUCE team has released JUCE version 8, which contains many new features, including WebView plugin UIs, which is very exciting. To start using JUCE now, go to juice.com, download JUCE and follow their Getting Started guide. I have also put a link to it in the description. Have fun creating audio apps and plugins. And now, back to the interview. So finally, after your 3 years at Elk Audio, you parted 5 years. I'm sorry. So you and Elk parted ways, and I wanted to ask, what are your plans for the nearest future?
I'm afraid I can't say anything right at this moment, but I can divulge as much as saying that I'm staying in the industry, and depending on when the podcast is out, the news might be out on LinkedIn or maybe a couple of months later. I don't know the time frame, but yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's the plan.
Cool. So I'm looking forward to hearing about this. Okay, but that concludes, let's say, the part of your chronological biography. Now we're going to talk about more technical stuff. So the first thing I'm really curious to ask, because you have this big ongoing project that's called 2, which you call a media control workstation. And could you briefly elaborate what is it about?
Definitely. It's during my research, initially for my PhD, I realized that so many time-based media applications share common user interface patterns and also patterns under the hood. So like 3D animation packages, character animation packages and motion capture, music software, VJing, video editing, lighting control. You get what I mean by time-based media applications. That's my term, so if you'll have to define it, it's not really a widely used term.
So don't Google it.
Yeah, if you Google it, you'll see my face, but yeah. Probably. But what's interesting is that all of the applications concentrate mainly on enabling users to manipulate digital control signals in various ways. So you edit a curve, and in your DAW, you think, oh, it's the cutoff filter. In your 3D animation package is a coordinate. In your lighting program, it's the brightness of a light, etc. But really what you're doing is just you're editing a control curve. But then all of these programs really restrict unnecessarily, I think, what those signals can be used for. So by only have a fixed static mapping to what they can be used for, you can't really use those programs for things that they were not intended for, but you might want to use them for creatively. So in that sense, 2 is a DAW for the things that DAWs don't support, I guess. It's the kind of program that people normally would use maybe MaxMSP for, but I'm thinking I should have, but MaxMSP is essentially still programming. And I was thinking, what's the next step? How can you make a program that allows you to do the things that you would do with MaxMSP with control signals, but that is even less like programming? Mm-hmm. It is an end user application. That was the idea. Is it usable for music? Absolutely. Not in a way that it would compete with Ableton Live, but in a way that you can use it to manipulate control signals for music in ways that you wouldn't do in Ableton Live. In that sense. And basically it has all the familiar tools that you see in a DAW, like timelines, property panels for the devices that you have, control panels, knobs and sliders, that whole thing, shebang. You receive them, you record them, you send them out. The addition is that you can also, in what I call a weighted routing matrix, you can map incoming control signals to outgoing control signals, and you can also animate those connections. So you can have a narrative in the connections between sources and destinations, which is inspired directly by dub mixing, which is kind of, they did that with sound in Jamaica, Lee Scratch Perry, King Tubby, in the 70s. And I figured, because I also really like dub mixing, I figured I should make something where you can also dub mix with control signals, not just the sound, but the control signals. And that was the idea.
Okay, cool. So can you use it, as I understand it, you can use it for live performances and also for kind of like offline use where you render the result?
Yes, but the program doesn't really make any sound. It doesn't render graphics. In that sense, it controls other software, like I call it a puppeteer, in like for a better word.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have an application that can be remote controlled over, I guess, OSC. Like Resolume can be controlled over OSC. Many lighting applications can be controlled over OSC. Ableton Live can be controlled over OSC. Many VSTs and many programs that you make yourself very quickly in Max MSP or processing or some creative coding environment. You don't make a GUI, you just control it over OSC. And then you can have this program control all of these together from one central place and mapping signals between them or from controllers and instruments.
Okay, I saw on your YouTube channel that you can also integrate it with Unreal Engine. I think it was a very cool use case there.
Yeah, you can control Unreal Engine with OSC, definitely. You can.
Yeah. So can you share how large is 2 in terms of lines of code?
Last time I checked, it was just a tad over 100,000 lines of C++. That's not the engine. I mean, there's a lot of GUI code, which is it's JUCE GUI code. So it's more than half that is definitely GUI code. Still, it's not a small program.
Oh yeah, for sure. And apart from JUCE, can you name other libraries or frameworks that you use? Because I understand the project is primarily in C++, right?
Yeah, purely.
Okay.
I also use Ross Benzina's OSCPack. It's a very good OSC library. And libOssia is a very, very big library, which I plan to use more of in the future. For now, I only use it for the support that it has for OSC query, which is namespace discovery for OSC. Really neat. And I also use the SACN library for controlling DMX lights over Ethernet.
Okay.
That's it for now.
Nice. And so you mentioned this a little bit. So just restate it as if you already said this, but from within too, you can control other applications. So is it done primarily via OSC, or are there some other methods to do it as well?
It's mainly over OSC. There are lighting consoles that can be remote controlled over DMX or MIDI.
Okay.
But mainly OSC is taking over. Also in the 3D sound industry, there's the ADM OSC standard. There's a lot of reasons to use OSC wherever you have namespaces that are not easy to standardize. Mm-hmm. And even with MIDI 2.0 coming out, there will be a lot of use also for OSC for the cases where the namespace might vary widely. Like think of Resolume, if you know it. It's a VJing program. Even with MIDI 2.0 out, I'm not sure you should be controlling Resolume with MIDI 2.0. I could be wrong. Even then, there might be a use for OSC. It's for, very varied and dynamically changing and very complex and rich applications. Many hundreds of parameters, even thousands. But I'm very excited about MIDI 2.0. I will definitely use it a lot more where I now use OSC when I've integrated it, and many more support it.
Okay, cool. I really, I would really like to see MIDI 2.0 support coming to JUCE, as I believe it's happening soon. So it also would like to see examples of code using it, but of course not into, right? Because it's closed source.
Yeah, for the time being, it's closed source. I might even start charging for it when I get even bigger user base. It's not that big now. I have users, but they're not in the thousands. So I prefer to just keep it free for the time being.
Okay, sure.
But maybe I'll start charging at some point. That's that sort of thing.
Like you need to do what everyone in this area does. So you need to allow it for free, then make everyone addicted to it, and then start charging.
That's the idea.
Exactly. So can you share what's the completeness state of 2?
It's definitely very usable as it stands, and I'm in contact with artists that use it in their projects all the time. But I mean, given infinite time, I would definitely have made many, many more features than it has now. There's so much I want to add that I haven't, like clip launching, actually DSP on audio to extract control signals, not actually recording audio, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of feature extraction, envelope following, this sort of thing. Oh, the list is long. There's so much I could do.
Yeah, it sounds super, super cool. And do you have like in your mind, like a date that you would like to, release it by? Like version 1.0?
It's kind of like, it's funny. It's kind of like Touch Designer, which is still in beta after 15 years out, and the version is still version 0 point something. It's been the same way with tools. Like I've had public versions out for 10 years, but I'm thinking 1.0 is when I charge money. But it's definitely very feature complete for many use cases also today.
Okay, sure. So my last question on 2 is how have you been able, to find time, energy, and motivation to work on this software in your free time? Because it's not an endeavor that one can take lightly, I think.
Oh, it's a little at a time. A few hours here and there, sometimes during holidays. When my wife and kid are on the beach in the middle of the day, I'd rather stay in. If I don't read a book, and I do it when it's fun. Sometimes I do a lot. Sometimes I might not touch the code for months. It's kind of when I feel inspired and when I feel that it does me good. And also do it for learning. It's as you said, usually to learn architecture and things, you have personal projects, and this is where I learn a lot.
Okay, awesome. So staying a little bit in this area, I wanted to ask, because one of the big overarching themes of your professional career is a combination of audio and visuals in real time. So I want to ask a question that's vague on purpose. After all your experience, do you have any personal thoughts on this domain?
I guess the reason for that is because some of the most captivating live art I've ever seen have been performances where music and visuals and light fuse very, very well together. It's very rare to see because it's a lot of work and it doesn't pay. And it's definitely hard to achieve. But when it works, it's fantastic. It's always been kind of bubbling on around there. You see more visuals with DJs, but then they don't really play instruments live in the sense. You have a lot of stuff on the Sphere. I don't know how much of that is scripted, the Sphere in Vegas. But yeah, when it works, it's fantastic. So I really love that stuff. But it's always from a musical perspective to me. It's always about the music that can also be reflected in other ways through dance, movement, graphics, lights. There's one beautiful example, even if it's really 15 years old now. It's one of those things that has reached what's called aesthetic completion. It doesn't really age, even if it's technological. It's still current, I'd say, 10, 15 years later. It's No Such Things, Eclipse Blue project with Daito Manabe. Look that up on YouTube. It's very beautiful. Just to give one reference.
Okay, thanks. I'll definitely check it out. So thank you for this input. And I think, this is an interesting idea that is maybe not so much shared, in the audio community. So definitely thank you for also bringing this in. Then I have wanted to ask, because you've worked on a number of software projects and most of them were large scale, which I think doesn't happen that often. So can you share what is the biggest difference in creating small scale software versus large scale software? And by large scale software, I mean software that's not, comprehensible in full by a single person in a reasonable amount of time.
We can have a series of episodes on the topic. I'll distill the answer to, I guess, the main point. I guess the difference is how forgiving the process is, and how much upfront design and preparation is needed as a result. Any software writing has complex trade-offs where, there's no silver bullet. There's no right solution that everybody just uses. Those are sort of the things that define the architecture. But the thing is, when you write a simple program that's like, say, 10,000 lines of code or whatever, you can backtrack. You can even throw away a couple of thousand lines. It doesn't matter. You refactor as you go. You learn from your mistakes. And also, when you're using frameworks like JUCE, much of the architectural and design work is done for you. And quite brilliantly, I may add, I think one of the best ways to learn to write readable, good, clean code is read the JUCE code base, in my personal opinion. But contrary to when, writing a smaller plugin using JUCE, large-scale software is very unforgiving. And what's worse, when you have realized that you have been going in the wrong direction, it's often quite late, in the sense that you've already written a lot of the code and it will take a lot of time to fix. And you may even be forced to throw away a lot of code and rewrite. So, there's a lot more risk to it. So you need a lot more knowledge and design and preparation work before you just start writing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with this. And I hope people who listen to this podcast and who, hire freelancers, they understand that the larger the project, the more upfront designed there must be. And neglecting this will result in not just, doubling costs, right? But tripling them, quadrupling them, etc. So I think it's a very important point.
I wonder how many times companies hire freelancers for really large projects and have the freelancers do the design work. But I don't have much experience specifically on that. Maybe you have.
So from what I've seen, it's mostly like it's a full package, right? So it's design. It's mostly application, right? No one hires for design and implementation. They hire for implementation. And most often you need to educate them. Then you need design up front, right? You need to
definitely some of it
think this through. Yeah. Especially you need to account for changing requirements, and that happens all the time in professional software. So no,
and
like answering your questions, I haven't seen. Sorry.
Yeah, and you need requirements.
Yeah, but
to start with the most important thing, it's not always you get those. Anyway, sorry.
Exactly. So answering your question, no, I haven't seen anyone being hired just for the design in audio, right? Because that happens for sure in like non-audio enterprise software. So now let's move, I think, to
that wasn't exactly my question. Sorry if I'm interrupting.
Okay,
it was more. Would they hire contractors, in your experience, on very, very large projects where the contractor also does design work, not only?
Oh, okay.
Or would they hire them more for, already designed things? Here's what we designed. You take it and work on it. That was what I meant.
Okay.
And not you partially answered it, but I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, I think it does happen. Yeah, I think it does happen. Because still in the audio world, it's often not so rigid. So you get very interesting setups of work, I think. Okay, so I wanted to move to kind of the other big overarching theme of your career, namely software architecture. And one can see this because you've done, 4 audio developer conference talks, and 2 of them focused solely on architecture of digital audio workstations. And the other 2, I guess, also touched on this a little bit. So let's talk about software architecture, which I think is a very exciting topic, and for me especially. So maybe one thing is that I ask around is that since I started to work in this industry, I've seen this discrepancy between, how software architecture is discussed in the non-audio world, so in the general software engineering world, and how it is approached in the audio programming world, especially that the audio programming community is heavily influenced by the JUCE C++ framework. So could you describe, how, in your opinion, time-based media software, as you described it, or, audio plugins are different from, let's say, traditional business software, especially now that we've seen the rise of the popularity of microservices?
Yeah, that is an interesting point that I've been thinking about. I touched on it in my ADC talk this year. And audio plugins can be small. They can be just 3,000 lines of code plus JUCE. But they also can be an entire DAW inside of a DAW. I've made at least one of that kind. So, and there's many more. Look at, Superior Drummer or Addictive Drums. Those are DAWs. And anyway, so plugins can be very complex too. I've read a number of the popular books on software architecture, and of course, they all concentrate on the type of software that is the majority of what's written around the world today, which is distributed software and distributed on networks and the internet primarily. Some of the much older books I read were not about that, but they were so old that the knowledge in them was not current enough, I'd say, to recommend those back from when desktop software was king. So, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. But current books in architecture definitely concentrate on distributed software. But with that said, much of the theory in the books translates very well to a DAW, just that one has to think a bit more about how, since the books never really use such software as examples. And sure, some of the architectural patterns used in industry, for example, microservices, which have been in vogue for the last maybe decade in distributed software, now it seems like they're falling out of favor and they're going back to monoliths. I'm not sure. I'm not in that field. But much of that doesn't really translate to a desktop application where real-time performance is critical. Those kind of have trade-offs across opposite ends of the spectrum. But the literature also spends a lot of time on how to, research a design, gather requirements from stakeholders, carefully consider trade-offs to satisfy the architectural characteristics that you've defined, and how to arrive at an architecture that addresses the requirements and one that will be explicitly evaluated based on the characteristic criteria when you write it, and also for the duration of its lifetime. All of that knowledge definitely directly translates also to when writing a DAW, those sort of strategies and practices, even if they're quite abstract. So you have to learn them on that level and deal with the fact that the examples are in distributed software. Those bits are directly transferable in my experience, definitely.
Okay, thank you. That gives me also personally like a different perspective to read these books, because I'm reading just now actually this software architecture book by Len Bass and Kazman, right? Mm-hmm. So the one with the violet cover. Mm-hmm. And hearing that from you, that to kind of challenge this book and to think of it in terms of, okay, how can I turn it around to apply it to audio software, makes really a lot of sense. So I think it's a very good piece of advice. And I think you've also, shown in your talks how you can take design patterns, from software engineering and apply them in the audio world. So I think that these resources are also very valuable. Okay, so moving on with software architecture, I wanted to ask, in your opinion, is all time-based media software alike? So digital audio workstations are similar to video editing software, to DJ software, etc., etc.
To significant extent, I would say they are, though not always. But the differences are often further down on the actual software design level rather than architectural level. So in video software or in planetarium software or in graphic software, you have the issue of throughput. Mm-hmm. We have to have throughput of massive amounts of data fast. And sure, it's sort of latency sensitive, but not like audio. Mm-hmm. While in audio, it's sort of the opposite. Sure, you need throughput of quite a lot of data in terms of audio, but the main issue is the latency. But it's still, it's still a lot of common ground in terms of the architecture. There is a slide, there's an image in my first ADC presentation on architecture where I show the common UX patterns across time-based media software. And I think that slide really sort of illustrates how many things they have in common, because if they have all of that in common on the surface, they will also, below the surface in the code, support what you see on the screen with very similar structures under the hood, has been my experience.
Okay, thanks.
Even CAD software and structural and engineering software and 3D animation software actually have a lot in common with DAWs.
Okay.
A bit less than, say, a VJ program, but I mean, they still have property panels. They have a sort of tree-structured model. You select something on your model, you get the panel for it. You have your views. You know, you have timelines in many of those. Think of all of those things. They're in that graph in the ADC presentation.
Okay, cool.
Interactive views.
Yeah, I haven't talked about this, value of this kind of tree-based property approach. Okay. And, I know that you've given these amazing talks on digital audio workstations. So we're not going to go into details on this. Like everyone who wants can watch these presentations.
Thank you.
Especially that, in an audio format, it's hard to show graphs, etc. But I wanted to ask, for you personally, what are the biggest challenges in designing and coding digital audio workstations?
Oh, another massive topic. And it goes to any large application, the sheer scale of it, I'd say. And here, I think Dave Rowland's talk really answers that exact question in an ADC talk called, very humorously, and I very much like the title, Why You Shouldn't Write a DAW. And I'd say the title should give you an idea of the big challenges in designing and coding digital audio workstations. The only application I've made entirely myself that's similar to a DAW, although it doesn't have an audio engine, which is a big challenge in itself, is Two. But yeah, I've done a lot of work also on Sushi, so I get a say.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really curious if we'll get one day kind of a way to visualize, how these programs were evolved over time and how they started. That would be really interesting, based, for example, on commit history, etc. So
yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, exactly. So the last question on architecture here is that, in the work of an architect, quite a lot of time must be spent on design and documentation. And as I already said, in our talk, in freelance work, sometimes clients want to cut down on the amount of, development time in general, which then causes, cutting down on, for example, carefully documenting architectural design and decisions, something that you touched on in your ADC presentation last year. So I wanted to ask, because in my opinion, this kind of short-sighted approach leads to development problems in the long run, and I would say even in the medium run, right? These problems start popping up quite fast. So what's your experience in this area? Have you ever had to justify why you are writing, let's say, architecture decision records?
Oh, all the time. But also the point is very valid. If you're a startup and you have to get the code out yesterday to validate the product because you don't even know if there's a product market fit and maybe you'll throw it away anyway. The last thing you care about is documenting the architecture for when you eventually hire more developers to maintain it. You can do it when you have the money. And that makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, if you're, say, making a planetarium application, just, I randomly chose the example, not because of any personal experience. And you're edging on 1 million lines of code, then you should have some documentation. You should have some design. It helps.
I understand, but I really I think it's a good discussion because then what happens is on another project that I saw, it's like, okay, we're approaching this in a startup way. We write code very fast, which results we have a lot of static data, a lot of, everything is connected to everything, global data, all the worst patterns that you can imagine, singletons, etc. And then you release it and the business say, great, it sells, it works, let's develop it further, right?
Yeah.
And then you're left with this so-called big ball of mud. And what you basically should do at this point is to just, turn it to ground and write it from scratch because it's really in a horrible state. Bear with me. And even if not, let's invest in a huge refactor. Sure.
Yeah.
But this will hurt because software still needs to develop, right? It needs to pivot, needs to change. So I'm really curious if you have a take on this approach. Can this startup approach then lead to a disaster again in the long run, not in the short run?
The person that has the perfect answer to that is on his way to become a billionaire, I think. I don't have the definitive answer on that. I'm not sure anybody does. If they do, I'm envious. I'd say it's about just enough documentation, which is a massively difficult balance to strike for sure. Just enough. Architecture is actually the title of a book that I've read. And also being concise and expressing what you mean very, very briefly and clearly is a hard skill to master because no one's going to read your 100-page architecture document, even if you get the time to budget, which you never will. But of course, the alternative is definitely not having zero documentation. So it's also very much about having experience and having been humbled, which is something that we are very frequently in this industry. You start being cocky that you think you know things, and then bam, there comes something that you never imagined you'd have to know just around the corner. And staying humble about the knowledge you lack, and hopefully maybe staying on top of knowing what you don't know if you're that mature, which is also very hard, can help you kind of make an informed decision on how much is enough design, how much is enough documentation.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot for answering this very difficult question. Okay, and now I wanted to ask you, because from what we talked in person, so privately, I know that you, as me, you love books to gain knowledge.
They help. And
I'd like to take the opportunity that the podcast format gives us to talk, about your favorite books in programming, digital audio signal processing, and virtual reality. So first off, I'd like to start with programming. And can you name what are your favorite books when it comes to C++?
Oh, there I'll be boring. It's like, Bjarne, A Guide to C++. I think it's in the 3rd edition, 4th. Not very big, still very, very condensed in terms of the knowledge that you get. Specifically in terms of the actual C++ language, there's a massive amount of awesome books. I haven't read all of them, but there's no shortage on that. In terms of programming more generally, Gang of Four is still a classic. I would not implement the design patterns exactly as they show in their UML diagrams in this book from 98, but it's definitely still worth reading the book for their thoughts and explanations on the why. Why do we need patterns? Where did the idea come from? How should we use them? How should we not use them? That bit is still current. And the UML diagrams, read them, understand them, because then you will also understand why the patterns, as they are also evolved and described in Klaus Igelberger's book, C++ Software Design, often are a much better idea 25 years later. But use those two books together.
Yeah, so I still need to read also Klaus's book, but I, of course, I totally agree on the on the Gang of Four book. Especially, I like that the examples that they give, they are taken from real world applications. They're not some, you have a car class and you have wheel class, etc., which is not justifiable.
Is that example in that book? That's not the best example, actually. But
that's what I mean. Like, it's not in the Gang of Four book, but it's in a lot of, like object-oriented programming books.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We're in agreement there. Working effectively with legacy code was another book that changed the way I think about programming. It really drove home the argument that unit tests are useful. You should be writing them. Again, not maybe in your 10,000 line proof of concept thing that you're writing evening and weekends to test the market and you might throw away. But in commercial software, you should have good test coverage. You just should. You're saving money. There's no excuse not to. Basically, it's expensive. It's much more expensive not to have them, has been my experience. And I've worked on massive code bases without them, with some, and with many. And one of the reasons I definitely loved working on the code at Elk was we had good code coverage, good review practices, good practices in general, which made sure that even with a small team, we could be very fast and really produce good quality code that we knew worked because, we had the coverage. There were very few surprises with those code bases and many more in other ones where we didn't have that kind of structure.
Okay, good. That's great to hear. And I also love this book. And I'm, there are a lot of books on C++. There are a lot of books on software design, software engineering practices, a few books on software architecture, but there is just one book on legacy code. And that really does not stop to amaze me.
Refactoring is also a good book.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I forget the name of the author just now.
Martin Fowler, right?
I'm sure that's who wrote it. But yeah, it's a good book. A bit, maybe not that much older, but yeah. And then, of course, software engineering, software design, software architecture books. There's the Clean trilogy by Uncle Bob. There's the Code Complete book, which sort of covers the same topics in a different way. So when you want to revise, instead of reading the same books, buy that one instead. And that way you see the same topics from a different perspective. Code's the two architecture books, Software Architecture and Software Architecture, the Hot Pots by Richards and Ford. They are very current and really adding a lot to the knowledge on architecture compared to older books that I've read. I guess I could go on, but this is a good set of book recommendations on the technical side. There's always more.
Okay, maybe I wanted to ask on one specific book. What about Just Enough Software Architecture? Did you read this one? Would you recommend it?
I did read it as an ebook, and it's probably true what they say. It also was a few years ago that when you read on an ebook, you don't quite internalize the knowledge, because I'm sure I learned a lot from it, but I don't remember well enough now what and how I would recommend it. But I did read the ebook, I remember.
Okay, sure. But I think, as your list is very good. I think it's concise, and like from all the richness of books that we have at our disposal, then this is a very concise selection and a good starting point. So are there any more books that you would like to add to this?
Oh, absolutely. Let me think. If you like history, you should definitely read for the quadrilogy by Eric Hobsbawm, the Age of series, starting with the Age of Revolution that he started writing in the 60s, and wrapping up with the Age of Extremes, which he wrote in the 2000s. He recently passed away. The most thrilling history books I've ever read, maybe in close competition to Mark Mazauer. if you're interested in sort of global sustainability, economics, politics, that sort of thing, which is a topic I really like reading on. A favorite book of mine is Global Magic by Alf Hornborg. How shall I describe it? It puts under a new light. It reframes the role of technology in how it mediates human economic relations on a global scale and within the borders of a nation, now and throughout history. It's a must read, in my opinion. Fantastic book. Changed the way I look at the world, that sort of thing. It's an academic book, but, you know, as those go, it's not as hard as some others. What else? The Music Instinct by Philip Ball is a great read if you're interested in music, which I'm sure our listeners are. It's sort of, what is it in music that makes us like it? It's kind of about music as we perceive it rather than how we compose it. That was a good one. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it there. If people are into politics, economics, and philosophy, they can ask me, I suppose. I'm not saying I read 10 books on those topics a year, but I don't read much fiction. I almost only read non-fiction, so then I kind of have more recommendations in that direction than most people.
Okay, sure. But I think, as you said, like maybe some books are challenging, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't read them, right? It's also a good training for the mind, right? To read something maybe more challenging.
You get things from books that you don't get anywhere else, I would say. Definitely.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so the last question that I have, that is kind of technical, is that, if someone wanted to start working in this area of what you describe as time-based media software, can you suggest, a very brief sketch, let's say, of a learning path for them? What should they do first?
If you include music software under this umbrella, which I'm sure you do, if it's for developers, then I'd say the resources we have for learning specifically audio development are very, very good today. There's really beautifully written open source code bases, also really badly written ones. Don't read those, but read the JUCE and the Traction Engine code base. Sure, some GUI code in JUCE is a bit old tooth by now, but it works, so they haven't changed it. But large part of the JUCE code base is beautiful. Learn to use those. Read the code as you do, as you use them, and you will learn a lot. If you're talking about the development perspective, second best, the resources for game development are huge. That's a whole other rabbit hole. There's a lot of really good material for learning Unreal Engine, Unity. I haven't spent much time on that in the last couple of years. I used to when I was doing virtual reality using game engines, so not very recently. But then again, there's resources both in terms of books and in terms of online learning materials for those. Interesting software to look at from a user perspective, other than two, I would say Touch Designer, Notch is a very cool application, sort of like After Effects, but real time. Resolume is a VJ application that's maybe the most well-known. And of course, Max MSP, which is programming, but it's data flow, visual programming, and it's used very much by non-programmers. So you could define it sort of as an end-user development application, programming for artists rather than software engineers. Kind of like Touch Designer also, which is more of a kind of higher level, more bigger data throughput version of Max MSP, I guess, for graphics and video a lot as well. And that's it in those contexts. And I'm sure all listeners know about DAWs. I'm not going to go into those.
Okay, not again, right? So thank you so much. And so now we'll conclude with a few, let's say, fun questions that where I ask about your current practices. So the first one is, what is your current tech stack? Which programming language is your go-to choice? Which IDE, which operating system? Are there any other tools that you use day to day?
No, they're very boring. C++, I'm sure you guessed. I use C Lion if I have a choice. But I mean, Visual Studio Xcode work too. But if I can choose to use C Lion, I will. Also because I've worked on all three major desktop operating system and embedded Linux. And C Lion then is definitely the best IDE that you can just fire up and run on all the desktop operating systems. And then, of course, I mean, Python. I'm not a Python developer, but I use Python. CMake, I guess, is a language, even if it's really just for supporting C++. Whatever other scripting language may be needed that I learn and forget. I mean, I've written in most languages. Sorry, not most languages, but I've written code in Java, C#, JavaScript, TypeScript, God knows what, and forgotten about it, and relearned it and forgotten it. I don't use them daily now until I'll need it again and relearn it. That you know the drill. And I still use MaximSP a lot for prototyping and testing, and in my creative R&D practice for fun. Often inside of Ableton Live through Max for Live, when that makes sense, or standalone, depending on what I'm doing, really.
Okay. And what is your operating system of choice then?
The answer is yes, depending on what I need to do.
Okay.
Windows, Mac, Ubuntu.
Okay.
They all work horribly and beautifully depending on what perspective you have.
Okay. Sure. And while you're programming, do you listen to music?
Oh, yes. Almost always. Often ambient music when I write English or difficult code. For easier code, anything goes as long as there's not too much lyrics. Or if the lyrics are in a language I don't understand. So I hope I don't just learn French and Arabic by listening, and Turkish, because the music from all three are fantastic. There is a risk, considering how much I listen to it, that I just absorb the languages slowly. But yeah, as long as I don't understand, it's fantastic. So I listen to a lot of instrumental music and non-Western music for that reason, with the exception of French, which I don't speak. I used to code to drum and bass a lot when I was younger. I don't know how I managed to do that. And if I try that now, it's not going to end well. And I have the tradition also, finally, on the topic of music, which is a bit funny. I started writing too about the same time I discovered Giles Peterson, the DJ and BBC radio show producer. And always when I write too, I listen to Giles Peterson. So his is the only voice who I can listen to talking while coding and not just not be distracted, but actually enjoy it. There's no other person I can think of. And his music taste is so amazing, you don't really ever want to skip. So yeah, that's a recommendation. Go to the BBC Radio 6 page and listen to Giles Peterson.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a very solid recommendation. And then, how do you rest and recharge after your hard programming work on digital audio workstations and others?
Oh, I take long walks in the woods that are just outside my window here in Stockholm, sort of trekking up and down around the lake. That's my morning commute when I work long distance and work remotely, which is very common in our industry, I guess. I suppose that's the case for you as well. So I just leave, walk for 45 minutes, come back. And the trekking does me good. I try to run. Should do more of that. I love playing my drums and synthesizers. I have to practice alone, but it's always best playing music with friends and in bands and in groups. And I kind of have projects going on and off for fun, not too much stress. Just enjoying being in a room with musicians, that sort of thing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it's just very solid advice. And actually, like this morning walk thing is grounded in science. So congrats on
I didn't know.
on nailing this. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Ilias. Thank you for this interview. I really, really enjoyed this. You shared a ton of useful knowledge that I'm sure all the listeners will be happy to take away with them. And the last thing I wanted to ask you exactly is, if someone wanted to contact you, where do you recommend they go?
Oh, thank you very much for the invite. This was good fun, and thank you for the interest. And to contact me, I mean, for anything, even remotely professional, like if you're in the same industry, LinkedIn is great. Even if you don't have a job offer, just, write a message in your connection request, because this might be your experience. Otherwise, I do get a lot of connection requests from people that think I should be writing their high frequency trading backend or whatever. Whatever it is they contact people for on LinkedIn. And I might accept or not, but if you write a message, chances are higher. And you can, if you're interested in too, I have a form for that, which you reach from the controlmedia.art website. I was struggling with a URL, so I got that one. I can't just register to.com. That'd be weird. Or also impossible. But controlmedia.art, and there's a forum there that you can register on and write if it's something that you think might be relevant also for others to read and see a public discussion. There's an email address in the TO manual. If you download and look in the PDF manual, I can't really write the email on the internet. You know how that goes. Otherwise, I'd be happy. I would have been happy to share otherwise. But there's that. I guess those are enough. I'm probably also on other platforms and things. I'm sure you'll find me in various groups on Discord and Slack as well, public ones. But I shouldn't be hard to find.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you again for this interview, and I wish you much success in all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much, Jan. Much the same. Much obliged, and all the best. All the best to you.
Thanks. All right, everyone. That was Ilias Bergstrom, a C++ software architect. Thank you, Ilias, for agreeing on this interview. To you, dear listener, as usual, all the people, places, and references mentioned in this podcast episode can be found in the episode notes at thewolfsound.com/talk028. Once again, it's thewolfsound.com/talk028. If you want to help the podcast somehow, please consider subscribing to the WolfSound YouTube channel and giving a thumbs up to this video. Also, please consider leaving up to a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Please suggest in the comments on YouTube or on the blog who you think should be the next guest. Finally, don't forget to check out my DSP Pro online course on learning digital audio signal processing at wolfsoundacademy.com/DSP-Pro. And did I mention that there's a 30-day money-back guarantee? Thanks for listening, and see you in the next one. Take care.